If I Only Knew by Wanderlove. Chapter 8. I'm afraid we won't be able to hold the planet for much longer, Obi-Wan says gravely, ducking as a stray mortar shakes the command tent, kicking up dust and debris. He coughs and Cody looks over to him worriedly.
What changed? I thought the Hypori campaign was going well,
Master Windu demands. The silent Masters Yoda and Ki-Adi-Mundi look grim.
It was, but there's a new Druid General Grievous apparently. Master Barik attempted to capture him and remove his influence from the field, but I have not heard back from him since. I suspect that he is now one with the Falls.
There was a moment of bleak silence, broken only by the sounds of ceaseless bombings on Obi-Wan's end.
Sirs, with all respect,
Cody interjects,
the planet is lost. We are comically outnumbered, and this General Grievous is far too smart to fall for our usual ploys. The men are exhausted, to mention nothing of General Kenobi. We aren't asking you for reinforcements, we're asking for an evacuation.
We lost all our air support when Grievous arrived, Obi-Wan explains, bone-deep tiredness in every word. And even if we had any gunships or transports left, our ships in orbit are too busy fighting for their own lives to help us.
Who's closest?
Master Mundi asks, looking down at the holotable, which shows the position of every ship and attack battalion in the galaxy. He frowns, and the counselors exchange a look.
What?
Obi-Wan demands, his hope dwindling.
Closest the 501st is, Master Yoda says, escorting Senator Amidala to a delicate negotiation in the Outer Rim.
But they're still more than 3 days away.
Master Windu finishes with a sigh. Oh, Obi-Wan knows they won't last that long. He inhales and straightens his back. We will have to make it work.
Very good. We will let Knight Skywalker to change his heading as soon as possible. May the Force be with you. I'm with you.
The holograms flicker out of existence, and Obi-Wan and Cody are left alone in the tent.
General, 3 days isn't...
I know, Obi-Wan says, but we can't bend the laws of physics, so 3 days is what we have to work with. Come on back to the trenches with us. The next 2 days are hellish. Every inch of Obi-Wan's skin is covered in scrapes and bruises, and he's fairly certain he's nursing a broken rib. But he has to ignore it, throw himself into battle, and continue to cut down an endless swath of droids. He knows that if he falters, the last hope in these men's eyes will flicker and die. They've been pushed back to a single, pinned-in position, the only good news of which is that it makes it that much easier for Obi-Wan to reach into the Force and bolster the remaining troops. His muscles shake as he tries desperately to deflect the hail of blaster fire. The Separatists seem to sense their flag in reserves and have redoubled their efforts, but he misses more than a few, his robe singeing and a trooper falling on his left. Stand down! He commands harshly as he drops down himself. They are currently kneeling in hastily dug shallow trenches just barely chest high. For the most part, the men have just stayed on their knees the past 2 days, only their blasters peeking out over the top. Unfortunately, lightsaber combat is not well suited for trench warfare. He leans back against the dirt wall of the trench panting and wordlessly passes a new blaster battery back to Cody. He takes a deep breath, nods to Cody, and pops up again. Cody lays down a wide swath of cover fire as Obi-Wan redirects the Separatist blaster bolts aimed towards them back to cut down any spindly battle droids that have ventured too close to the lines. And then the bond in the back of Obi-Wan's head, which has lain painfully dormant the past 6 months, flares to glorious life! He can't stop the joyful, hysterical laugh that escapes his lips. Anakin's worry and fear pour across the bond, reaching out across an entire system to make sure that Obi-Wan is still alive. He sends back his own feelings of pain, relief, it's okay now that you're here, and Anakin begins feeding energy through the bond to bolster Obi-Wan's depleted reserves. It feels as if he's chugged 7 cups of caf in one sitting. All reinforcements have arrived! Obi-Wan calls out to the men. He's sure that he must look half-crazed.
It's too early, sir, Cody responds sadly. There's still a full day out.
No! They're here! Obi-Wan chuckles. He snaps on his lightsaber to deflect another blaster bolt. Someone must have been experimenting with illegal engine modifications. Cody exchanges a look with the 2 troopers beside him, Waxer and Boyle, if Obi-Wan's not mistaken. Waxer shrugs, makes a twirling finger motion near his head.
Jetty magic,
he says, going back to shooting down droids. The droids, of course, haven't gotten the memo and are still marching ahead ceaselessly. He steps forwards, deflecting their blaster bolts with ease, using the energy that Anakin is feeding him, ducking and spinning. Okay, maybe that last spin hadn't been the greatest idea. His ribs are definitely broken. In the face of the unstoppable barrage. The troopers, while still a little confused by his inexplicable change in attitude, follow loyally.
For the General! For the 212th! They call out to each other and train their blasters on the enemy with newfound determination.
The attention of the droids is pulled abruptly away by the scream of engines above. A slim fighter shooting across the sky in a stomach-turning barrel roll, skimming way too low to be entirely safe. The fighter ducks even lower and begins shooting, using both the underside of its body and its guns to begin breaking the droid's lines. It gives Obi-Wan's men some much-needed breathing room, and for the first time in days, Obi-Wan fully steps out of the hastily dug trenches. He folds his arms over his chest and watches in satisfaction. He is soon joined by his gaping troopers.
What is that?
Boyle asks, sounding simultaneously horrified and impressed, as the fighter continues to knock droids about like an overgrown bowling ball, laying waste to hapless pins.
That is Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan says with no small measure of pride. I'm sure the rest of the 501st is on their way. Ah, there we are! Anakin's fighter is joined by a whole host of additional Light Republic craft, flying at a much more reasonable height as they shoot down droids from above. Gunships begin to emerge from the clouds, the troopers aboard already throwing open the doors and shouting to their brothers to clear a space for landing. Obi-Wan adds his voice to the din and begins to sprint down the lines. Begin evacuations immediately! Help the wounded to the ships and guard the rear! Cody is right beside him, barking out orders left and right. Together, they drag a badly injured clone to his feet and help him limp towards the nearest transport. There are hundreds of gunships landing, loading up with troopers and supplies, and taking off as soon as they are full. Obi-Wan and Cody are amongst the last to leave, holding the droids back with the 501st support and making sure that no man is left behind. With a nod, Cody lets him know that they are the last ones left, and Obi-Wan hops into the nearest ship, hand wrapped around a handle for balance. Let General Skywalker know that we're all clear, he shouts to the pilot as the transport rises upwards. He gets a thumbs up, and the 501st Squadrons begin an escort formation, drawing the fire of the Separatist air support away from the fleeing gunships. The atmosphere grows ever thinner, and Obi-Wan helps Waxer drag the doors of the gunship closed before they entered low orbit. Obi-Wan waits patiently during the minutes-long journey to the Republic cruisers, his jittery nerves hidden by a perfect, placid Jedi mask. When they finally land and can throw the doors open once more, he is greeted by the sight of Senator Amidala, her hair as perfectly coiffed as always, traveling down a deep, rich Nubian maroon and looking distinctly out of place in the bustling hangar. Just behind her stands a golden protocol droid that seems vaguely familiar. Master Kenobi! She greets, face breaking out in a wide smile. She extends her hands, and Obi-Wan hops off the transport to grasp her hands in his. Once they had sorted out the matter of Anakin's affections, and Obi-Wan had apologized for his boorish behavior in the immediate aftermath on Geonosis. He and the Senator had reignited the close, warm friendship that had started on Naboo but grown distant with time. She will always be more Anakin's friend than his, but that didn't mean that Obi-Wan doesn't enjoy joining her for a Nubian tea ceremony every now and again.
It is good to see you! We were worried we would not arrive in time.
It takes more than a couple 100,000 battle droids to take me out, my lady, he responds, squeezing her hands. Sorry to interrupt your negotiation.
Oh, never you mind,
she responds, easily, waving a thin hand airily.
The full battalion escort was a waste of resources anyways. The Chancellor insisted on it for some reason.
Really? Who is the new Chancellor, by the way? At Amidala's strange look, he does a double take, trying to back-calculate the date in his head. I'm sorry, there was an election, wasn't there? It should be coming up soon. If not, I'm sorry. It's so easy to lose track of time out here.
There was an election scheduled, Senator Amidala says sourly, but in light of the war, the Senate voted to postpone it indefinitely.
Oh, Obi-Wan says, unsure of what else to say. He's saved by the arrival of Anakin's squadron, dozens of small craft touching down around them.
Mechanics and medics race forward to aid their brothers, the chaos growing ever more frantic.
Rex, everybody's back aboard. We've got 212 ships in tow. Go to hyperspace before the Separatists decide to get their shit together.
Anakin barks into the comlink on his vambrace as he hops out of his distinctive fighter.
He spares a brief moment to pat fondly at the top of his astromech's dome. Good job, R2. I'll make sure to put in for an extra long oil bath.
Then he turns, scanning the hangar with his eyes and the Force. He's growing out his Padawan cut, his curls in that awkward in-between phase, and there's a thin, still livid scar over one eye. But other than that, not much has changed. His gaze alights on Obi-Wan, and his entire being lights up. His strides long and sure as he makes a beeline for them. Obi-Wan steps forward to meet him, holding his hands out to catch Anakin's head between his palms, slowing down his former apprentice's momentum so that they can gently tap foreheads, their bond privately singing between them. It's all right. I'm here. I'm safe because of you. Obi-Wan brushes gentle reassurances against the bond. In the 6 months they have been apart, Anakin's constant well of fear, anger, fear, has seemed to multiply tenfold. Master, when they told us it was the 212th in trouble, I couldn't breathe. Anakin emits a raw edge to the thought. He pushes the memory of taking the call from the High Council, his breath and heart in his throat the entire time.
General?
Cody coughs, interrupting their reverie. Obi-Wan blinks dazedly, unused to having the bond so alive after so many months of silence. He steps back to face his commander, taking care not to step too far away.
Cody,
Obi-Wan agrees.
This is my former Padawan, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker.
Cody's eyes bug out, seeming to recognize the name. He's far too much of a professional to say anything, though Waxer and Boyle are not similarly disinclined.
You trained General Skywalker? Oh boy, that explains so much.
Waxer mutters, not seeming to realize how his voice will carry in the hangar. Anakin's men and Senator Amidala look on, amused smiles on their faces.
Ha! I see Rex has been sharing stories across the comms,
Anakin says, taking in stride. Waxer blushes a little to be called out, but nods.
What's her name, Trooper? Waxer, sir. Well, Waxer, don't believe anything General Kenobi says to you about me. No matter what he claims, I learned everything I know from him, so it's no one's fault but his. I do not remember ever teaching you how to fly, Obi-Wan interjects dryly. In fact, I distinctly remember trying to break you of your awful flying habits to no avail.
Bah! Lies! He pauses, then seems to fully take in the trooper's bloody, half-falling down state. Waxer had done his very best, and he was in better shape than most, but that really wasn't saying much. Anakin shifts to evaluate Obi-Wan, who in turn tries to straighten his hunch, redistribute his weight, and hide how he's been curling over his broken ribs. It doesn't work, of course, and Anakin's eyes narrow.
Come on, let's get you all to the infirmary.
Obi-Wan opens his mouth to protest, then takes in Cody's and Anakin's equally murderously determined looks and decides to make a strategic retreat. As they begin to move away, he hears Senator Amidala's protocol droid speak up and does a double take.
Well, that was quite enough excitement for one day. I do hope the negotiations are more sedate.
He slides his eyes over to Anakin, incredulous.
Why does Senator Amidala have your mother's protocol droid? The pirate life wasn't good for 3PO's nerves,
Anakin says with a shrug.
Mom needed to find him a new home, and he's quite happy in the Senate. I think they appreciate his talents a lot more, and he's quite vain about the new plating. I'm also pretty sure Mom and Padme are using his built-in comms to send encrypted messages. Dear Force, the reach of your mother's network is truly frightening sometimes. I think I'm gonna try convincing Padme to lend me R2 permanently.
Anakin continues, jovial.
I only borrowed him for this mission, but he did really well. It was his idea to skim the drone lines like that, you know. And I think Senate work is a little boring for an astromech of his caliber. What do you think? I think that you somehow managed to find the only other being in this entire galaxy that can match your bull-headed recklessness.
Obi-Wan mutters mostly to himself.
And of course it's a droid. Of course it is.
Anakin laughs and slings an arm over his shoulders. Obi-Wan can't quite hide his wince, and Anakin frowns.
Master, he says, looking her over worriedly. It's been a rough few days. Obi-Wan responds neutrally. I'm sorry. I should have pushed the engines faster. I shouldn't have listened to Yuroren. We could have gotten here even faster. And damaged the ship so badly we wouldn't have been able to escape to hyperspace. No, Admiral Yuroren was right to caution restraint, Obi-Wan sighs. You arrived just in time. I am hurt, but will recover. Do not blame yourself. I'm the chosen one, though, supposedly. The galaxy is falling apart, and I was useless to stop it, but I should at least be able to protect you, Anakin says, frowning fiercely. The darkness in his mind coils tighter. Anakin glances at him sharply. When he'd first taken Anakin on as a Padawan, he'd been absolutely adamant with the Council. No mentions of Qui-Gon's favorite prophecy anywhere near Anakin ever again. It was too much weight to put on one boy's shoulders, and he was all too familiar with the terrible sensation of trying to live up to an impossibly high standard that could never be met. After the disaster that was Xanatos, when Obi-Wan had realized that Qui-Gon had still not let go of his former Padawan, still held him up on some sort of pedestal despite him having fallen, he had realized that everything he ever did would be measured against that perfect, idealized version of Xanatos in Qui-Gon's mind, and nothing would ever be enough. Even knowing how impossible it was, he still allowed himself to be pulled into the sucking weight of those expectations. But despite his best efforts, Anakin has indicated his awareness of the prophecy and raised this issue a handful of times over his apprenticeship. He dearly wishes he could find and slap whichever Jedi had explained Qui-Gon's insane theories to Anakin. Even though they had returned to the temple only briefly, he hadn't been shy about letting anyone know that he believed Anakin to be the chosen one of prophecy, and rumors had immediately started flying. Nevertheless, the Council had respected Obi-Wan's decision and had sternly informed all the Knights and Masters, especially those who interacted regularly with Anakin as his instructors, that they were not to bring it up to the boy under any circumstances. Clearly, someone hadn't listened, but Obi-Wan could not think of who would be so cruel as to place such a heavy crown on the head of a child. No more of that, Obi-Wan says, shaking his head fiercely. You did save me. I might be a little worse for wear, but that's no failure of yours. Without you, I would surely be dead, not just nursing a few bruises. Anakin still looks displeased, but Obi-Wan can feel him swallow his desire to continue the argument, drawing a shield across the dark thoughts and locking them away. Obi-Wan frowns to himself. Locking such feelings away cannot be healthy, and makes a note to return to the issue. Later, though, he doesn't want to ruin their reunion with a sure-to-be explosive argument. And a set of broken ribs, Anakin says in a light teasing tone. It's not just bruises. Don't you dare pretend otherwise. I can feel your ribs across the bond, you know. And he finishes as they arrive in the infirmary. I'm sure Kix will back me up. The clone in question, a serious-looking man who has chosen to keep the standard dark buzz cut that most shinies had when they arrived straight from Kamino, looks up and nods at Anakin. He makes his way across the room and gestures to a nearby empty bed. Anakin wraps his arms securely underneath Obi-Wan's thighs and shoulders, gently cradling him as he lowers into the bed. I'm not that badly injured, he sniffs, shooting Anakin a dirty look. He pauses halfway down, Obi-Wan's back still a few inches from the mattress. Oh, I'm sorry, Anakin says, a mischievous note in his voice. I'll stop now if you want. Bit of awkward timing, but if your ribs are truly uninjured, you should just be able to get the rest of the way by yourself, no problem. Obi-Wan narrows his eyes and briefly considers it, but ultimately decides that even the put-out expression on Anakin's face would not be worth the side-splitting pain. He nods stiffly and graciously allows Anakin to lower him the rest of the way, Anakin laughing the whole time. For all that Obi-Wan treasured his former Padawan's genuine laughter, it was really quite weird, unattractive belly-deep snorts that often made passers-by pause in confusion. Anakin stays as long as he can, watching Kix's quick professional wrap-up job with a critical eye, and keeping Obi-Wan company through the myriad of scans and shots and fluids he's given. They catch up on their respective adventures of the last 6 months and discuss the latest drama between Hondo and Shmi. He'd stolen her a diamond ring the size of a pali fruit. She had sold it to fund another ship for their growing armada. He was now heartbroken. Before Anakin's comm begins to beep rapidly. Go on.
Obi-Wan says, making a little shooing motion. Anakin looks reluctant, and Obi-Wan's heart warms a little at the familiar action. On Tatooine, even the simplest, most treatable of injuries could turn to a death sentence if the masters decided the cost to treat, clothe, and feed the injured slave during convalescence just wasn't worth it. As a result, Anakin put very little faith in medical prognoses and worried incessantly until the injured party was completely functional once more. "Anakin, you had kicks. I'm completely fine. I just need rest and time. With a little bit of Bacta to help my ribs along, I'll be up and about in no time. I'm sure I'll be able to meet you on the bridge in only a few short hours." "You better, Master," Anakin says, using the familiar address which Obi-Wan found both jarring and comforting at the same time. "We'll have to make a report to the council soon, and I am not facing them alone." Before both Anakin and Obi-Wan are sniggering to themselves, a warm thread of laughter, together, agreement, winding its way through their heads as Anakin exits the infirmary. Obi-Wan passes the next hour by cheerily shuffling around the bustling infirmary and chatting with the men of the 212th, who also have made their way into Kix's care. A boost to morale and a few small dribbles of extra energy shared through the Force would do wonders for their recoveries. "General," Kix says exasperatedly for the third time, "what did I tell you? No getting out of the bed with those ribs of yours, and no extra little boosts in the Force either. Nope, don't want to hear it. General Skywalker won't care when he rips my head off, so I don't care either. Back to bed, now." Obi-Wan grumbles a little to himself as he makes his way back to his little bed. Though it appears that he has gained a neighbor in the past few minutes, a dirty shell-shock clone who looks on the verge of tears. He's doing his best to hide it, but for the past 6 months, Obi-Wan has been surrounded day in and day out by hundreds of identical physical copies of the same man. He knows most of their physical tells by now. Obi-Wan glances around and his hand darts out to pull of one of the thin bedside curtains by his own bed completely closed, so that it is blocking the clone from view of the rest of the infirmary. For good measure, he reaches out with the Force and uses 2 fingers to flick close the curtain on the opposite side of the neighboring bed, so now the 2 of them and their beds are encased in a small fabric bubble.
"What's your name, Trooper?"
Obi-Wan begins gently, sinking down to sit gingerly on the edge of his bed, directly across from his new friend. By the looks of his armor, he's a foot soldier in the 212th, though Obi-Wan has never met him before today. The man looks away, trying to hide his red-rimmed arms.
"Cut," the trooper says, voice muffled. "I'm sorry, General Kenobi, sir." "Don't be," Obi-Wan replies, waving a hand. "War is hard, and Hypori was... Well, I would not blame anyone for such a reaction after that mess." "Yeah, but it's what I was made for. I should be good at it," the clone says bitterly. "It's the only reason I exist, after all." "No, it's not!" Obi-Wan says harshly. "It may be why the Kaminoans created you, but that is not all you are." "Yes, it is, sir. There's no pretending otherwise." The clone's voice is equally hard. "Maybe there's something else I'm meant for, something else I'm good at, but at this rate I'm never going to find out. Even if the war ever ends, I doubt I'll live to see it. I'll have spent my whole life fighting for some stupid republic I don't even believe in." He trails off and shudders, tears beginning to fall anew. Obi-Wan leans forward. "Then go, find it." "You mean, go, as in leave this war behind and find out what you truly want out of life." "You're talking about desertion. I know you found me crying like this, but I'm no coward, sir, I swear." "It is not cowardice to want a life outside this war. I, too, have dreamed of fleeing to some obscure planet in wild space, one with plenty of weird and undiscovered flora and fauna, so that I could spend the rest of my days studying them and the mysteries of the Force. I imagine many of your brothers feel the same, but the difference is, I have decided that my dreams and hopes are an acceptable price to pay in order to save what lives I can, and preserve a flawed republic I believe in. I make that choice every single day, but it takes an immense amount of bravery to make the opposite choice as well, to step back and refuse to fight for your own health and sanity." "Clones don't get that choice," Cut says quietly. His tears have slowed, and he sounds as if he's trying to draw into himself. I understand that, and perhaps it makes me a terrible hypocrite to ask Cody and Chris and Waxer and Boyle to keep on fighting when I am telling you this. But none of them have ever expressed such views to me. And I will not allow any man to fight beside me simply because he feels that he didn't have any other option." Obi-Wan offers him a sad, small smile. That's a nice sentiment, sir, but where would I go? Everyone knows what a clone looks like. I'd be shot in Separatist or Hut space, or even better, decommissioned in Republic space.
Obi-Wan strokes his beard, thinking.
I do know a woman in the Outer Rim. She leads a small independence movement on Padawan and would gladly offer you asylum, either with her or on some other planet.
Cut looks up sharply, a glimmer of hope shining in his eyes. As quickly as it arrives, it disappears again, and his face falling.
I couldn't do that,
he says, shaking his head.
I couldn't put her in danger like that, bringing the wrath of the guard down upon her.
Let's just say that she's used to sheltering fugitives and pissing off people much more powerful than herself by doing so. Honestly, I think she enjoys it.
There's a long pause.
Well, in that case I can see why you two are friends,
Cut says slowly, raising an eyebrow. His whole demeanor has started to change, his tone lighter, his spine straighter. He swipes the last of the tears from his eyes.
Family, actually,
Obi-Wan corrects with a twinkle in his eye.
You'll want to go to Tatooine and ask around for Shmi Skywalker. It might take a while, she's not always on planet these days, but when you do find her, tell her that you serve with General Kenobi and that my freedom is stolen, not bought. She'll know what it means.
I can't even imagine how I'd get a ship to Tatooine.
Obi-Wan laughs as he stands up and begins to sweep open bedside curtains.
Now, Trooper, you can't expect me to figure everything out for you, he chuckles. No, from here on out the rest is up to you. But I have every faith. You're smart, adaptable, and persistent. If you want to, you can do it. The real question is, do you want to?
Silence. He bends a little, side to side, to check his ribs and nods to himself.
Well, I think I'm mostly recovered. It's off to the bridge with me. It was an honor to meet you, Cut. I wish you the best of luck, no matter what you decide,
he declares. Obi-Wan glances back, the bright lights of the infirmary throwing harsh lines across Cut's dazed face, before turning away and walking away. When he makes it to the bridge, Cody and Anakin frown fiercely and open their mouths and begin to protest as one. The next few minutes are a flurry of fussing his commander and former Padawan determined to not get back into the infirmary until a series of short but insistent beeps alert them all to the fact that a small craft has been launched from the aft hangar without authorization. Rex moves to activate his wrist-com, brow furrowed in worry and confusion.
There's no need, Captain,
Obi-Wan says nonchalantly. Rex freezes, wrist halfway to his mouth, while he, Cody, and Anakin all turn to stare at Obi-Wan in befuddlement.
It appears that in the confusion of the evacuation from Hypori, we forgot to mark down a fighter and its pilot as missing in action. Silly us.
What? That doesn't even make sense, Anakin begins before trailing off. His eyes sharpen.
Which pilot, sir?
Cody begins, eyes shadowed, voice even.
I believe he called himself Cut.
Cody pauses, visibly struggles with himself, then locks eyes with Rex and has some sort of weird telepathic argument with his brother. He sighs, brow clearing.
Better to list the missing fighter and troopers separately. No offense to Cut, may rest in peace, but he failed most of his flight simulations on Camino, and I'd be a terrible commander if I ever assigned him to air support.
I was testing out engine mods on the spare fighters before adding them to the cruiser.
Anakin chimes in.
A lot of them blew up before I figured it out. We could just add it to the list. It's a long list. No one will notice an extra fighter.
A very long list.
Rex mutters. The four of them pause and take a moment to share identical grins. Afterwards, Obi-Wan and Anakin are technically supposed to split up, return to their previous assignments, and just head on their merry way. But they're almost immediately pulled into some new crisis with no time to breathe, and that mission goes so fantastically well that the council agrees to keep the 501st and 212th together for the next mission. And then that mission is another success, and the one after that, and the one after that. Eventually, without anyone ever really discussing it, Anakin and Obi-Wan become a team. The team! Rarely, if ever, assigned apart. Their troopers begin using the paint normally reserved to decorate their armor to splash a bright yellow and red circular symbol on their ships, and then everyone begins calling them Open Circle Fleet, even in official documentation. He has no idea what that actually means and suspects that the Senate doesn't either. It turns out that having to codify an entire military organizational structure practically overnight was a terrible idea, and as a result, the rank, designation, and nomenclature system was just one big steaming pile of contradictions and nonsensical add-ons. The war drags on, and for a lack of qualified alternatives, Obi-Wan begins to rise in the ranks. He continues to slowly gather other Jedi and their battalions under the umbrella of the fleet until the council just decides to appoint him to a seat on the Jedi High Council and name him a general.
Is this payback for all the times I passive-aggressively questioned orders?
Obi-Wan had asked aloud, still numb with shock at Master Plo Koon, had chuckled idly, slapping a shocked Obi-Wan on the back and escorting him to his seat.
Yes,
Master Windu has said bluntly, not looking up from the latest report from the front that he had been skimming. And that's when it really becomes official, as Obi-Wan now controls the deployment of all the Jedi generals in the Open Circle fleet, and he just chooses to ignore the rest of the council when they hint at Anakin being assigned elsewhere. Really, if anyone had told him that being promoted would give him the authority to tell the council no, he would have accepted the whole mess with a lot more grace. He can even order senators around nowadays, and they hardly make a peep of protest. Of course, the one person who remains completely unaffected by his promotion is Anakin himself, who acts as he always does, perfectly happy to follow Obi-Wan's orders when he agrees with them, and also perfectly happy to blatantly disregard them if he feels otherwise, as evidenced by his current actions. The Open Circle fleet is currently racing their way to Christophsis to aid a beleaguered Senator Organa, and Anakin should be following Obi-Wan's command to study Admiral Yodaren's notes regarding the Separatist commander they're about to face off against, the infamous Admiral Trench. Naturally, he is doing anything but that, ensconced in Obi-Wan's quarters and hunched over a completely unrelated datapad.
What about Master Mundi?
He mutters to himself. He pauses, thinks about it, then shakes his head.
No, I don't think his saber style would suit her at all. Master, what have you heard about Knight Ula?
Obi-Wan says, feigning disinterest, but secretly fascinated by the latest example of Anakin's now 3-month-long quest to find the perfect Jedi Master for Ahsoka Tano. He'd started with Obi-Wan, of course, who had only laughed and told him in no uncertain terms that he needed at least 5 more years to fully recover from Anakin's apprenticeship before he even began thinking of taking another Padawan. He thought that would be the end of it, but no. Every spare moment Anakin's had since then has been devoted to obsessively trawling through records and mission reports, even interviewing other knights at one point, all in an attempt to find a Jedi Master he deemed worthy of his young protege.
Ula, what have you heard about her?
Anakin presses, frowning at his datapad.
She doesn't take very many field missions, apparently prefers the peace and quiet of archival holocron research. I do not know Knight Yula very well, but archival duty, while essential important work, does not exactly sound like something Initiate Tano would be interested in. You're right. It's just that I'm running out of options. Ahsoka's just turned 13. They're no longer sending initiates to the core with the war and all, but she doesn't deserve to be foisted on some half-rate knight last minute.
Obi-Wan sighs. Honestly, it was amusing at first, but now Anakin's obliviousness is just plain embarrassing. How had he ever raised such a clueless Padawan?
Anakin,
he says gently,
there is one option you haven't yet explored. Have you ever considered taking Ahsoka on as your Padawan?
Anakin stares at him dumbstruck.
What? You mean like me? I was knighted less than a year ago. I can barely take care of myself, let alone a Padawan. Yes, I know the feeling,
Obi-Wan responds, wryly.
But I like to think it all worked out for the best between you and me. Why not yourself and Ahsoka? You've already shown yourself to be a patient and talented teacher, and you are clearly already very interested in her well-being. That's a lot more than most Master Padawan pairs start out with.
Anakin pauses.
Seduce. Do you think the council would agree? I think Master Yoda and Master Plo Koon would be absolutely thrilled that all their scheming finally paid off,
Obi-Wan says with a raised eyebrow.
I also think that if you can manage to make everything official in the next, 48 hours or so, and leave out the fact that I was the one who suggested it, you will rob Master Windu of about 300 credits.
Anakin narrows his eyes and tugs at the thread of amusement currently winding its way through the bond.
Was everyone placing bets on me? He demands. No, not at all. I, for example, was barred from participating due to my undue influence on the wager in question. It's also against the code to take credits from hapless young Padawans, so they weren't allowed in the pool, though they might have formed their own. I'll go calm the council,
Anakin grumbles and gets to his feet, a thunderously grumpy look marring his features as he stomps out of Obi-Wan's quarters.
Remember, don't let them know I was the one who told you!
Obi-Wan calls out cheerfully. Anakin keeps storming away but raises his hand behind his back in a rude gesture. Christophsis is, well, exactly like the dozens of other battles across the galaxy that Obi-Wan has been a part of. Granted, the scenery is a little more unique, but it's a lot harder to truly admire the crystalline landscape when you're slicing your way through hundreds of droids, and really, it's the same story, different planet. There's a space battle, gotta clear that blockade, followed by a slow slog of a ground battle, gotta clear that siege, followed in turn by a dangerous covert operation behind enemy lines. Gotta deal with Dooku's latest pet Darksaber! They're now in the last part of that familiar plan, racing their swoop bikes across suspiciously unpatrolled separatist territory to confront whichever boogeyman Dooku had sent this time. Their little side jaunt will offer Rex and Cody in their own investigation. There's a traitor in the ranks, and hopefully the need to share this juicy bit of time-sensitive intelligence will make the traitor act in haste and make a mistake that will make his identification easier. Anakin revs his engines a bit and edges ahead of Obi-Wan. He sends a flare of annoyance across the bond.
This isn't a pod race!
Obi-Wan scolds over the roar of their engines.
We are not 12 years old!
You're just saying that because you're losing. Anakin crows across their bond to continue much more seriously. We seem to have picked up some friends, and I don't know how much they can hear us. Ah, of course. They haven't tried to harm us yet, and the path has been suspiciously clear of droids. I think someone wants to be found. Oh, a trap! That's unfortunate. For them. Anakin pushes the throttle, zipping forward with glee, and Obi-Wan is forced to match his speed or be left behind. They allow the droids to herd them, many paths blocked by dozens of droids, only for one or two others to be suspiciously clear of any activity. Soon they arrive at the main building, cautiously dismounting their bikes as they glance around. Up another flight of stairs, they come into a wide domed room, empty but for the wide tables, and abandoned, hastily shoved into the side chairs. Droids had little use for such things. Obi-Wan's mind brushes against something cold and angry, and he locks eyes with Anakin and nods minutely.
So this is the belly of the beast,
Anakin says out loud, comically exaggerated. Obi-Wan winces and decides to just give up the ruse.
Really, Anakin? What? I'm totally getting better at this. You're really not,
Obi-Wan sighs.
I do hope we never get assigned a mission that relies on your acting skills.
Boys, there's no need to squabble. A sultry voice interrupts from overhead and behind them. They both whip around to face at the newcomer. Her familiar thin and grey figure displayed beautifully as she arches her back and leans against the railing.
Huh, Obi-Wan responds warmly. Ventress! I never thought this mission would be unpleasant.
The assassin smiles, laugh cat-like. The pleasure is all mine, dear Obi-Wan. How I've missed you.
What? He's not your dear anything,
Anakin says in a squeaky voice.
Tut, tut.
Do you see what sort of rudeness I must deal with when you're not here? Ventress says, shaking her head and slinking forward. She unsheathes a set of curved lightsaber handles from behind her back. Anakin and Obi-Wan copy the movement, igniting their own blades.
Must we?
Obi-Wan continues, twirling his lightsaber in a showy display.
And here I thought our conversation had such a promising start.
My, such kind words. But we both know that is a certain thrill in this that verbal sparring alone cannot elicit.
Ah, of course. Wouldn't want to lose that spark, would we?
Obi-Wan responds with a smirk. Anakin swings out widely, stepping in between Obi-Wan and Ventress, physically breaking their eye contact.
Would you please stop encouraging her?
Anakin growls as his blade sings against Ventress's crossed sabers. She falls into a deep defensive stance to absorb the momentum of his powerful downward strike. Hush, Skywalker, hasn't anyone ever told you to be quiet while the adults are talking? Ventress hisses. They launch into a flurry of blows, broken only by Obi-Wan's decision to somersault into the action. Ventress steps back to give herself some breathing room from their joint attack and performs a series of fanciful twirls with both blades. It's a masterful display of skill.
Very impressive, my sweet.
Obi-Wan says appreciatively. Anakin lets out a sound of dismay from beside him before charging forward twice as fast, his brow tightly furrowed. He performs a similar trick, though with far finer control and better footwork than Ventress. He pauses and looks back towards Obi-Wan, a strange, half-hopeful look raising his features. Anakin, watch out! Obi-Wan leaps forward and body slams Anakin to the ground, Ventress's sabers missing them by millimeters. Ah, slappy! Ventress purrs as Obi-Wan scrambles to his feet to meet her next attack. Anakin is still recovering, halfway to his feet. Pay attention, Anakin! Obi-Wan reprimands, his own attention fully absorbed in dodging and countering Ventress's blows. Anakin joins in, and it's only a few more minutes until they have backed Ventress into a corner. Give up, Ventress. Anakin growls, fists clenched tight around his saber. You're outmatched. Is that what you think? Truly? She laughs. With a snap of her fingers, dozens of droids pour out of nowhere, blasters aimed squarely at their chests. Now this is hardly fair, my dear, Obi-Wan says, mind racing as he and Anakin bounce escape plans back and forth across the bond. I never claim to fight fair, Ventress says with a lazy shrug and a smirk. What are you waiting for? Come and get me, boys! Anakin throws his lightsaber at the nearest crystal pane. It lands squarely in the middle, deeply embedded in the crystal, and a web of cracks extending from its point of contact. With another pull of the Force, the saber comes flying back into his hand, and the glass shatters. Ventress instinctively steps back and raises a hand to shield her face. Maybe next time, Anakin declares as they leap out as one, knees tucked close to their chests. They land lightly, and Obi-Wan offers Ventress a saucy salute as she stares down at them. He turns back to Anakin as they begin to sprint away, back to their parked swoop bikes. We have to get back to base as soon as possible, Obi-Wan says. You think? Anakin replies with a snort. Did you draw that stunningly obvious conclusion when you were busy flirting with the Darksider? It was for the mission. Better have flirtatious and distracted than silent and scheming. Sometimes I think you'd flirt with a rock if you thought it'd help with the mission. Anakin grumbles as they remount their bikes. Obi-Wan quickly smothers a spike of been there, done that, but not quickly enough. Anakin's eyes snap to him, wide and disbelieving. Please don't tell me. No, that was a joke for forcing. You're serious. Technically, Z wasn't a rock, but a sentient silicon-based life form with telepathic abilities. Obi-Wan replies primly. Qui-Gon and I were sent to act as translators for a group of non-force sensitive humanoids who wanted to ask for mining permissions. See, quite like my hair. Apparently red is a coveted color for them. Anakin stares at him, then shakes his head and turns away. Together they start their bikes and begin zooming back towards the Republic Command Center, even dodging the suddenly much more active droid patrols. It's a quick trip. The generals are back, a clone shouts out. Fives emerges in the middle distance, distinguishable only by the coat of blue paint on his armor and the characteristic half-wild, uncoordinated movement of his arms as he attempts to wave them down. They skid to a stop inches from the toes of his boots. General Skywalker, sir, Fives says hurriedly. The relief ships have arrived. Finally! Anakin says, stepping off his bike and brushing off his robes. Swoop bikes may be fast, but they always came with a thick layer of accumulated dust and dirt. I was starting to think they were ignoring our calls for help. Come on, let's go orient the new arrivals, Obi-Wan suggests, sliding off his own bike and straightening his hunched-over posture with a screech of protest. Send Rex Cody to us, troopers. They're already there, sir. Even better. Together they walk out to the makeshift landing area and easily find Rex and Cody, the only figures staying still in the movement of troopers pouring out of the ships that have already landed. There are streams of white and black shouting out crisp commands and carrying off boxes of supplies. The relative uniformity of the troopers only makes the lone non-clone stand out, a familiar blue and white set of Montrals exiting one of the ships. Anakin's jaw drops. Ahsoka! He calls out. Her head snaps toward them, her gawking interrupted by Anakin's exclamation of surprise. She waves excitedly and starts loping towards them. Her eyes dart to the clones around them, and she visibly straightens and reins herself in, trying her very best to look serious as she now approaches them at a more sedate pace. What are you doing here? I'm your new Padawan, remember? She replies, once she has drawn close enough. She looks excited, full to the brim with bursting energy. We had a big heart-to-heart, and then we holocaumed the entire High Council. Any of this ringing a bell? Hey now, no need to get snippy, I know that. I meant, what are you doing here on Christophsis? Oh, Master Yoda sent me to join you now that we're official and all.
What? Since when do we toss the younglings into active war zones?
Hey! I'm almost 14!
My point still stands. Anakin, Obi-Wan interrupts with a gentle hand on his shoulder. You accompanied me on plenty of missions by the time you were 13. Yeah, but none of those missions were in the middle of a war,
Anakin says. Obi-Wan gives him a look,
and Anakin hastily backtracks. Okay, at least not officially. And it's not like we went in knowing they'd be so dangerous.
I can keep up, Ahsoka promises, eyes bright. You know I can.
I do know that, Anakin protests. And it's not that, it's just, we're in a bit of an emergency here, and this is not how I wanted to start your apprenticeship. The distant thunder of droids marching breaks the conversation. Looks like the Seps are done with waiting, Captain Rex says. He murmurs an order to a passing clone who nods and hustles away. Let's take this inside then. It won't be long until those droids find a way around our cannons.
Let's take them!
Ahsoka crows excitedly. Hold on there, Snips. Anakin sighs. Let's try to come up with some sort of a plan first, okay? You? A plan? My, but one is never cease.
Obi-Wan snorts. Anakin shoots him a dirty look.
Why don't you go get some gear from the armory? You'll need it for the days ahead.
Anakin suggests. Ahsoka beams and immediately rushes ahead straight for the command center. Anakin watches her go bemusedly.
Does she realize she doesn't even know where the armory is? Fantastic job, dear one. Less than 10 minutes in and she's already emulating your best qualities, such as never asking for directions and leaping before she looks.
Obi-Wan chuckles. He's enjoying this far too much. Anakin rolls his eyes and returns to Rex and Cody, his demeanor suddenly much more serious, brow furrowed.
Keep her away from the battle as much as possible,
he instructs.
I want our best men with her at all times. Fives, Echo, whoever else you think appropriate. We'll tell her it's a special operations unit, but if it comes down to the mission or her, I want them to pick her. Am I clear? Understood, sir.
Captain Rex snaps out.
Another ominous rumble rolls through the air, and Anakin locks eyes with Obi-Wan. They share a long look, then a nod. Anakin and Rex turn heel and begin to sprint after Ahsoka's rapidly fading figure.
Cody watches them go with a worried slant to his eyebrows.
Calm now, my friend, no need for that face. You know that Anakin and Rex will allow no harm to come to her, Obi-Wan says reassuringly. I know she's a little eager, but I have every confidence they can stop her from doing anything too reckless. Cody slides his eyes over in disbelief. When has the 501st ever turned down the opportunity to participate in someone else's reckless, harebrained scheme? Oh, well, there is that. For the record, sir, this is a terrible plan.
When everything is said and done, even the ever-pessimistic Cody has to admit that wasn't an absolutely horrible plan, Obi-Wan thinks in satisfaction. Granted, at some point, Ahsoka and Anakin had ended up sneaking enemy lines by hiding underneath the Christophsian equivalent of a trash can lid, and that had ended with a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat and the absolute minimum number of casualties possible, which really was all Obi-Wan was asking for at the end of the day. The war had sadly and rapidly redefined his metric of success. As the three Jedi enter the command center of the Resolute, the clones snap out quick, crisp salutes and then go back to the busy work of arranging a separatist surrender. The separatists did no such thing for Republic forces, of course, and the Senate had grumbled about the waste of resources, but the Council had held firm. No Jedi was going to slaughter a sentient who had already surrendered. They spread out in front of the comm unit, Obi-Wan adopting his favorite crossed-arm pose and Anakin clasping his wrists behind his back as they prepared to face the rest of the council. Obi-Wan's own exhausted mind is buoyed by the waves of excitement and nerves wafting from Ahsoka's mind. War is a horrible thing, but she is still only 13 and a brand new Padawan joining her master for her first report to the council. As they wait for the rest of the council to arrive, Obi-Wan sadly wonders how long it will take this terrible war to grind down even Ahsoka's irrepressible spirit. It is good to see you once more, Master Kenobi, Master Plo Koon greets as his form flickers into existence and snaps Obi-Wan's attention back to him. Masters Kit Fisto, Mace Windu, and Yoda soon join him. Knight Skywalker, Padawan Tano. I take it the engagement on Christophsis was successful. For now, Obi-Wan says with a shrug. Just in time, too. Master Windu continues briskly. There is some confusion arising in the Arcanus sector. It's begun affecting the hyperspace lanes we use to resupply our troops on Ryloth, so we must get to the bottom of the matter as quickly as possible.
Some familiarity with the hutch you have, Master Yoda continues. Make your investigation quicker,
easier. It should.
Familiarity, Anakin snorts. Ahsoka watches the exchange with wide eyes. Is that what we're calling it now? What seems to be the confusion?
Obi-Wan interrupts hastily before one of the counselors can comment on Anakin's attitude. Master Windu gives Anakin a beady-eyed look of disapproval, but continues.
The Senate sent a team of experienced negotiators to bargain with the Hutts for free movement of our supply and transport ships across Hutt space. Once they arrived, they reported an upheaval. The Hutts were too busy dealing with some sort of insurrection and flat out refused to meet with the negotiators.
We suspect a separatist plot to destabilize the Hutts, without the influence the status of hundreds of planets would suddenly be up in the air and open up a new front in the war. Master Kit Fisto says, usually grave. Begun on Tatooine, the unrest did. Anakin snorts again, and Obi-Wan chokes on his next inhale, startled. The counselors and Ahsoka look at him strangely. He tries to quickly regain his equilibrium.
Oh, pardon, but this unrest... It wouldn't happen to be led by a band of weak-whipped pirates? And a woman, human, dark-haired?
Obi-Wan asks in a strangled voice. Master Windu's narrowed-eyed look is an answer in and of itself.
Why do I have a feeling that I'm really not going to like what you have to say next?
Master Windu asks, exasperated.
Well, the great news is, Obi-Wan and I are so good at our jobs, we've already solved the mystery.
Anakin says cheerfully. Obi-Wan pokes him reproachfully at the bond. It wouldn't kill Anakin to be a little more respectful, especially when his Padawan is watching.
Master Kenobi. Oh, well, yes, I believe that it's a slave uprising. There's a woman, a former slave herself, who's been operating covertly in the area for at least a decade. Last we heard, she had joined up with a band of pirates out of Florum, and they were planning to take their rebellion out into the open. I believe the best path forward will be to let the uprising run its course. I have no doubt she'll be successful soon enough, and once it is all sorted, I'm sure Tatooine's new government will be more than happy to receive the Republic negotiators.
Well, that wasn't quite true. Obi-Wan got the sense that Shmi and the other slaves looked down on the Republic for their unwillingness to enforce their anti-slavery laws and just wanted to be left alone. So they wouldn't be happy, but they certainly would be motivated to give the Republic whatever they wanted, so they would leave the planet as soon as possible.
I take it you met her during your only long side trip to Tatooine 10 years ago.
Master Windu asks with a sigh. Her name's Shmi. Anakin asks completely unhelpfully, and they're bursting with pride.
She's my mother.
Master Windu stares. Inform the Council of this did not. 10 years you had. No warning you gave. Master Yoda continues.
Why would I?
Obi-Wan protests, eyes narrowing.
The Senate and Jedi Council have always taken a hands-off approach to Hutt space. If we weren't willing to interfere to free millions of sentients, I hardly see why we'd interfere when someone else decided to do it for us.
Master Windu inhales sharply, taken aback by Obi-Wan's tone. Even Master Yoda frowns, and though she is in no way responsible, even Ahsoka has begun to draw up her shoulders defensive under the thick air of disapproval. There was a long, furious moment of wordless tension.
Qui-Gon would be so happy to see you, how you run verbal circles around the rest of us, Master Kenobi.
Master Plo Koon chuckles. All at once, like a spring releasing its tightly coiled shape, the tension dissipates.
I think he'd be more horrified to see any Padawan of his actually on the council,
Obi-Wan replies dryly. I agree with Master Kenobi, Master Fisto says, once his laughter is trailed off. Their cause is just and righteous. The chaos might hurt the war effort for the next few months, but what else are we to do? Send a battalion to aid the Hutts? Even if ignore the war, country we do. Hardly have the men to spare for such an operation, do we? Master Yoda concludes, his voice brooking an argument. Master Windu shakes his head, more than in exasperation than true disagreement.
Very well then,
he sighs.
If we really are doing this, I want you both on the next ship back to Coruscant, so you two can personally explain the Jedi Council's decision to the senators involved.
As one, Anakin and Obi-Wan wins. Master Windu always did have a flair for picking punishments that would really sting, but inclined their heads in agreement and moved to hastily conclude the meeting. I just got out here, Ahsoka bursts out as soon as the council's huddles have faded. I finally get the chance for some action, and then we're sent all the way back to Coruscant? Is that fair?
Believe me, little one, there's plenty of action and danger to be had in the Senate,
Obi-Wan sighs as he finishes typing a quick message to Cody to share their new orders. The fleet is to stay over Christophsis while they take the Twilight back to Coruscant. Force willing, they will finish their tasks quickly and be back before the cleanup wraps up. I'd take a step over a senator any day. Anakin declares. They continue toward the Resolute's hangar and duck into the dinged gray metal hull of their new transport. R2-D2 is waiting for them and he beats out a cheery hello to Anakin, a much less polite insult to Obi-Wan, and a curious query to Ahsoka.
R2, this is Ahsoka, my new Padawan I told you about. Ahsoka, this is R2-D2, the most loyal astromech in the whole fleet.
R2's blue and white dome makes a 360-degree turn in happiness, and Anakin continues.
A separatist will shoot you in the back, yeah, but at least no one gets mad when you fight back. A Jedi lightsaber should not be the only solution to all their problems.
Obi-Wan reminds Anakin.
Yeah, but you also told me that it was unethical to use Force suggestions on them.
Anakin replies flippantly as he quickly, masterfully types in a series of commands to the Twilight's nav computer and gestures for them to sit down and strap in. R2 beeps out a confirmation of their takeoff clearance, and the ship rises upwards as they begin to zoom out of the hangar.
I more meant that you could try talking to them.
Obi-Wan sighs. There's a jolt as they move through hyperspace, and he holds onto his seatbelt with a white-knuckled grip.
Persuasion and negotiation are also important tools in the Jedi's arsenal. Oh, you mean like you? I do think you could afford to learn a little bit from watching my example. Yes, Anakin. You don't negotiate, though. You just charm them into stunned submission.
Anakin flicks on the autopilot, swiveling his chair around as he claps his hands together.
Okay, time for your first lesson,
he declares. Both Obi-Wan and Ahsoka look expectantly to him, faces upturned. Even R2 looks curious.
No flirting with the bad guys, no matter what your Grandmaster says.
You're still on this? Obi-Wan sighs, unbuckling his seatbelt now that the ominous ship-wide clinks and clacks have faded to the background. He leans back against the seat back and crosses one ankle over the opposite knee.
Distracting one's opponents with verbal exchanges is a perfectly reasonable strategy. Not all of us can simply use our staggering power in the Force to overwhelm our enemies in one fell swoop, you know.
Anakin rolls his eyes, stands from the pilot's chair, and cocks his hip. He raises his arms above his head and leans against a nearby wall. The fabric of his tunic pulls tight against his muscles and exposing every inch as he assumed a ridiculous parody of a pin-up pose that somehow still manages to be somewhat sexy.
Oh, Obi-Wan, I missed you,
he drawls in a poorly pitched imitation of Ventress's voice.
Oh, my dear Obi-Wan, I love fighting with you so much. She doesn't say it like that,
Obi-Wan says half-heartedly, gaze inexplicably caught by the curve of Anakin's back. Anakin slinks closer. For some reason, Obi-Wan can't look away, heart beating loud in his ears. Oh, yes, she does. R2 chimes in binary.
When have you ever witnessed me talking to Ventress?
Anakin asks, outraged.
Oh, Obi-Wan, you're so strong, so handsome.
Anakin continues, bending his eyelashes. Have they always been this long? He fakes a swoon and collapses on Obi-Wan, laughing hysterically. His arms wrap around Obi-Wan's neck as he hangs off him. The sweat slick from battle skin of his forearm slides against the sweat slick skin of his neck.
Oh, Obi-Wan, take me to bed now, you little beast.
Obi-Wan's pretty response dies on his lips and instead turns into a nearly audible croak. Anakin's warm affection and infectious joy are racing across the bond, suffusing and twinning with Obi-Wan's rising lust and somehow making it so much more. Anakin chuckles and gently pats Obi-Wan's cheek before prancing off to continue his pantomime for a delighted R2 and Ahsoka, who are offering full serious constructive criticism. Anakin swivels his hips and tosses Obi-Wan a fluttery-eyed, sultry look over his shoulder. And simultaneously one of the least and most appealing seduction attempts Obi-Wan has ever witnessed. It's so patently ridiculous and over the top that if anybody else had even tried, Obi-Wan would have brushed it off with never a second thought. But because it was Anakin, because he loved this beautiful, strange, crazy man so much already, Obi-Wan's discombobulated, panicky thoughts come to a screeching halt. Oh no, this is bad. This is very, very bad.